Hello and welcome back to the SecurityMetrics podcast. My name is Jen Stone and I'm one of the principal security analysts here at SecurityMetrics. If this is your first time here, welcome. Sure appreciate all of our listeners and viewers. And today's topic actually came from someone who is a listener of the show and wanted to know a little bit more about how to become a QSA. So I got the perfect person. I brought in Gary Glover. Gary is the Vice President of Assessments here at SecurityMetrics. Happens to be my boss as well. He's pretty awesome.
So you better be good.
Right? I'm always thinking that. Oh, no. No, that's not what I'm thinking at all. But Gary is, let me tell you a little bit about him. I know we've had him on the show before, but just as a refresher and for people who are new, as the Vice President of Assessments at SecurityMetrics, Gary manages a team of qualified security assessors, that's a QSA, in the PCI world, and penetration test engineers conducting remote and on-site security assessments for large and small companies. As a senior security analyst, Gary conducts various types of on-site network and computer security audits. Most of the audits are assessments for merchants and service provider compliance to the payment card industry data security standard, or PCI DSS. As part of this process, he consults with customers prior to the on-site visit to help them design and configure their network and computer assets to ensure the security of sensitive data. Gary also has experience conducting audits for credit unions, HIPAA compliance, CIS compliance. Actually, you're part of like any new thing or any type of assessment we do. You're always part of that conversation, how we do what we do. Welcome. I appreciate your time here.
It's good to be here. Thank you.
Did I miss anything?
No. I think that's or probably more than what I do actually.
No.
I used to do a lot more auditing than I do now. More it's kind of, again, consulting and getting people ready for things and also working on new products.
Right. And so one of the critical things, it's interesting how when I talk to people in security and asking me about, there is this attitude that I think sometimes people conflate, which is I can do anything I want in security, which you can. If you're new in security, you want to do anything, you can. But the idea is you can't do it right now.
Away. It may take a little time.
Yeah, some things take more time than others, right? And I feel like that's in the QSA world, it does take a little time.
Exactly. And, I think that's an interesting point that you made as far as, I don't know if it's our society or whatever, but nowadays people think that you can do, we've told everybody so long you can do anything, and I believe it, just like you said, anybody could do anything, but sometimes it takes years.
Yeah.
And it takes time and it takes experience and patience and stick-to-itiveness, right? This is not something that is just hey, I am right out of school or I'm just changing jobs and now I want to do this. Let me do this. And hopefully people will understand that some jobs in this world take some time and some expertise.
Right. And being a QSA in particular is one of those things. As an assessor, I can see why it takes the time, because there are certain things that you need to do that if you don't have sufficient experience and knowledge, you're going to really struggle and maybe not serve your customers as well as you should.
Exactly.
So from that perspective, what training, what experience, what does it take to become a QSA?
Okay, well, and I'll jabber on for a while, and I should probably be asking you. But
hey, I know what it took for me to become a QSA. You know what it took for the team.
And I guess that's a perspective I can talk to, is that everybody's journey is just a little bit different. And there are some common points that need to be hit along the way. And I have had experience with a lot of people over the years, interviewing a lot of people and moving. And the industry has changed, frankly. I mean, when I started when I was in the very first QSA class, before we were called QSAs, training for conducting these assessments with the PCI Council. And, the test was 5 hours long and it was handwritten and it was... it was and it was weird questions, and I spent more time writing reasons why the question was bad than answering the question. So, I guess what I'm saying is we've grown up quite a bit in this industry, and I think it's been a great thing, and it's a good thing to see. I call the old days the cowboy days, right? And now we're 15 years later, 16 years later, quite a mature organization, and processes and definitions on kind of skills that are needed to be a QSA. So, starting off in the industry, I think somebody with a good, solid background, maybe somebody who's been in IT for a number of years and who has, been on the other end of the other side of the coin, right? And actually installing systems and setting up firewalls and administering systems. I mean, that's great background. So if you're in that space already and you want to move into another space, this is a great way to go, right?
Right.
As a possibility. So, and not necessarily, in the old days, and even nowadays, I mean, cybersecurity is important, but it's not rocket science. If you have curiosity, if you have the ability to learn stuff on your own, and if you know how to type things into Google,
right,
you can learn a lot of stuff in this world right now, and this is one of those areas too. But cybersecurity, I think, do I need a degree in cybersecurity? Do I need a degree as a QSA? Do I need a degree in IT audit? I don't know that I can say specifically any of those things. Obviously, in the requirements to be a QSA, there are some specifics. You need 5 years of experience.
Right.
Or 4 years of experience and a degree of some sort. And sadly, it's either a bachelor's degree or a master's degree, or a PhD is the same. It's 1 year. So you need, and I think that's right. It's one of those trade kind of things where you have to have real life experience 4 years long. So it's that experience, and then some certain, and we can talk later maybe a little bit more detail about the certifications that need to happen along there. But frankly, if I were to boil it down, you need to have kind of the desire to deal with people.
Yes.
Is number one, right? And sometimes there are people that are so technical that it's really hard for them to deal with people, and they struggle with the interactive part of this.
There's so much more of personal interactions, personal relationships in this job than I realized there would be going into it. And I love that part of it. And so I'm fortunate in that way. But I have seen where if people aren't as comfortable with just talking to people, I mean, you sit down to do an assessment, and it's not just reviewing firewall rules. It's, hey, can you tell me why you're using these firewall rules, and who approved them, and can we talk to them, and so bringing in and getting everyone on the same page through conversation is not everybody's favorite thing.
No, it's not. But to me, that's one of the fun parts of this job. You can develop relationships that last multiple years. I have people in this industry now that I've known for 17 years that I still like to talk to, and that they still like to talk to me, that I developed a relationship while doing one of their audits or at a conference or something. And so to me, that's part of the reward. And let me say, the penalty of this job is writing. Yes. The reward is the people and learning about the technology. And frankly, if you like to figure out how systems work, how things move through, and my background is mechanical engineering, and so to me, I loved seeing how things worked. And initially when I was approached by this job by our CEO, I said, well, I don't do that. That's not what I do. And he said, well, you just think about it, look at it. And I started looking at it, and it really is just design work in another area. And I do like design work. So it appeals to a lot of people, I think, and I'm talking way too much here, but it appeals to a lot of people because it's not always hands-on. And so you don't have a beeper or a pager or a phone. Nobody's going to call you and saying the server is down.
I like that a lot.
You may wake yourself up in the middle of the night saying, oh my gosh, I don't know how to help this customer, right? But you're not being woken up, and it's more of a design. And to me, as a designer, as an engineer, I really love design work. And one of the really great things about this job is that it sounds like you do the same thing all the time over and over, but it's not.
It's not, yeah.
It's not, because everybody's network is a little bit different, and you have to figure it out, and everybody else wants to do everything just slightly differently, and you have to know how to apply the rule set that we've been given to all kinds of situations. And that's like the engineer's dream world in some ways, right?
It's super fun seeing how different organizations solve similar problems using similar but not the same architectures and tools and platforms, whether they're in the cloud or on-prem or in all of these different places and ways that they can apply kind of the general outlines of how does information get stored and shared, and because that's really what it's about, is the protection of very specific information in PCI.
Right.
That credit card data, everybody is involved in paying for things, right? And merchants are a super important part of our daily lives.
Exactly.
This episode is brought to you by the SecurityMetrics 2022 Guide to PCI Compliance. I personally helped with this guide and can highly recommend it to anyone going through PCI compliance. It goes through what the requirements are and then tells you in the real world what they mean, how to meet them, recommendations from auditors. So it's a great resource to get the fundamentals of PCI compliance. You can get it on our website, securitymetrics.com.
And that again was, that reminds me of one of the other attractive things about what I finally figured out in this job that was different. I developed software for years for large corporations. I worked in engineering projects for large aerospace corporations, all these kind of things. And none of the projects that I worked on in those jobs exist anymore, right? All of the, space things, the Mars rover, the whatever, everything, they're gone now. And the software I've developed, nobody uses anymore. But the people that I helped 17 years ago with security are still doing it.
They're doing other things and growing, expanding.
It's interesting how, and maybe it's a coping mechanism to deal with writing, but I like to think of that I have a job that can actually slightly make an improvement, rather than something that's disposable.
Right.
So anyway,
it matters that what we're doing is keeping information safe. So it helps the organizations that we're working with, but it also helps all of their customers. Nobody wants their credit card information out there for somebody else to use. You've mentioned writing a couple of times now, and that really is. Sometimes these reports are hundreds of pages long.
Right. Luckily, they're not hundreds of full pages. They're 100 pages of columns.
Yeah.
But it is a daunting thing. And let me talk for a second about this. I'll give you my spiel about writing.
Okay.
When I talk to a college, I often ask to go talk to college classes and talk to them about security and whatnot. But when I got out of school, I thought that I knew everything I needed to do to be an engineer. And I knew all the equations and all the stuff, and it was really exciting. And the first thing I was asked to do was write. And I'm going, no. You don't understand. That's not what I was supposed to do. I'm supposed to do this cool differential equation thing, right? When do we do that? Well, after you write the proposal that lets us win the thing, then you can do that. But you also have to write a report every week about what you're doing, by the way. So it was a huge revelation to me that writing was such a big part of working.
Yeah.
And I think, I wasn't good at writing. I didn't like to write, and I had a manager that forced me to learn how to write, and I can do it. I still don't enjoy it, but I can do it. And I think that's a daunting thing sometimes when people will come and think about, well, I'd love to be a security assessor. I want to just do the fun stuff. And for a while, we had a guy that worked for us that would say, well, I'll go out and do all the audits if somebody else will write the reports for me. And I'm going, that's exactly what we all want.
Yes.
Right? That's exactly what we want. Sorry, that's not part of it. You have to write up what you do. So writing is a challenge, but it's not like novel writing. It's like, can you describe what you saw so that somebody else could read it and understand what you said?
Right.
With enough words, but not too many.
Right.
And so it's not a scary amount of writing, but it's...
It does take commitment.
Yeah.
And it takes focus. Sometimes my focus is better than others, but part of the writing is you read the question that it asks you in the template that the council sends out, and this is similar in any of the frameworks. We're talking about PCI kind of today, but really any of the frameworks, it's similar. This is what it says should be in place, and then you talk about how you know it was in place or not.
Right.
And so it really does come back to your technical knowledge and the communication skills you had while working with people. Is just write it up so that, like you said, can someone else read that and know what your experience was with with that requirement?
And one of the things I like to do when I write too is to think, what if I needed to read it in a year? Could I remember what I did?
Right.
Because it does become a document of what you've done and kind of a journal in some ways of your security work. And so it's important to include enough detail that early on when we were writing reports, it was awesome because you could say, verified by observation that this was true.
Yeah.
Right. And so you're going, well, reading comprehension, it was the part you talked about earlier. I have to read the question and understand it enough to know how to answer it. And I think the industry is pushing us as assessors now to actually answer better. And reading comprehension English, interestingly, is important in this world, kids, right? I mean, this is important.
It is, yeah.
And being able to read a question and interpret it in a way that is right, is correct, and answering it that way, and then writing an answer that addresses it is a skill that's needed in this world. So anybody who's thinking about moving into this field or interested in it, embrace that part of the job and just say, this will make me a better person because I can write a little more.
Can you write in a way that is accurate, complete, and concise?
But it's the worst. It's the sucky part of the job. It is.
All right. I'm a little weird because sometimes I like that part because, well, hey, it gives you an excuse to put on like Antiques Roadshow in the background. And then you just write, well, these lovely people talk about antiques off to the side here. That's how I deal with it. That's not how everybody deals with the writing
and that's
part
important.
Of the
You
job.
have to be in the zone.
Yeah.
And when you're in the zone, you can crank out a whole lot of stuff. My hardest thing is getting in the zone.
In the zone, yeah. Some people
because
deal
I'll
with
avoid
it with
the zone as long as possible.
Mountain Dew for some people is how they get in the zone. But
That's right.
there's different ways you find, but you hit your stride. You find your way that you can make it happen. And so I don't want the inability to write to scare people off.
No,
of being
we've
a
had
QSA.
people that have I've worked with young QSAs that was not one of their strengths is writing, and I've seen them grow to be better writers. And we have QA departments and people that will help you and management. So it's not like you're all alone and don't even try to do this if you've never written anything before. What I'm saying is, if you want to invest the time to learn a skill that's not only important in this job but in your whole life, then this is a great thing to do. And yes, companies should work with you a little bit and help you understand how to do that. So it's not a scary thing, right?
Exactly. Well, and that's part of the process is you write the report, but then there's somebody who's going to QA that report.
Right.
And so if you haven't written it properly, we have a great technical writer who goes through it and says, hey, this is the way grammar actually works.
Right.
And then we go, oh, who knew?
Perfect.
And then also we have the technical review. So if someone, gets to second guess how we chose to look at that report, which makes us, kind of anticipate that and say, do I really feel like I know their technologies that they've implemented in ways that they feel is correct? Do I understand it well enough to be able to write about it and back that up to a third party? And that's what makes a really great report. You mentioned earlier, and I want to just kind of swing back to it, was are specific certifications required? They're not required in all
things,
regulations and all standards. Different ones apply different things, but our listeners specifically asked about the QSA. So that's why we're kind of focusing on that.
And that's been an interesting journey over the last 17 years as well. I mean, it started, I started, and there was no requirements. I didn't have to have any I was a software engineer and a mechanical engineer and with a lot of networking kind of experience. And I thought, well, I could probably figure this stuff out, and I can read and I can work the internet, right? So, but then soon after they started saying, well, what we'd like is to have a common body of knowledge of these guys. And let me just step back one quick second and say, that is an interesting part of this job, a QSA, is that, and I think some people think, and sometimes when you even read the requirements to be a QSA, you think, well, I'm sorry, I have to know everything in the world to be able to do this job. And I don't. So don't let that scare you.
No,
you can't know everything. None of us will ever know anything. You have a team of people to work with. But more and more, it feels like they're asking us to know a little bit more.
Yeah.
Networking has changed. Servers have changed. Virtualization. All these things are technologies that are growing. We have to keep up with it. So they started saying, well, we need this common body of knowledge. So CISSP was the first thing that they started asking for, the Certified Information Security Professional.
Right.
Through, I think it's ISC squared.
And that's not the only one.
No, there were
the only technical. That's the one everybody gravitates to.
The one everybody gravitates to. There's CISA and CISM.
Right.
Were some other ones. But those were the three that we started with, CISSP, CISSP, or CISM. You could do one of those three and be a QSA. Then a few years ago, I think the council is saying, hey, we're getting mature enough, systems are getting complex enough that now we'd like to be able to say, and we have a highly educated group of people already, right? We've got a pool of QSAs. Let's raise the bar just a little bit and say, now you need another certification on top of one of the others. So now instead of just CISSP or one of the three,
right,
or whatever, now you need one of those and a few others plus one other, right? And a few others. So, and I don't remember all of the certifications. Maybe we could find in the video, we can put up a list of all the ones you could do. But
it's actually really well documented on the PCI security standards page, and you can search that out, no problem. But I think the two that most people gravitate to are the CISSP on the technical side and the CISA on the audit side, because you have to know technology, but you also have to know how to perform an audit. So those two are very, complementary. But there are others that are, in general, they want you to know technology, and they also want you to know how to audit things, and that's really kind of how the breakdown.
And that's where
goes.
they've added this audit.
Yeah.
Realm recently, and that's been, and I think that's a good move. I mean, it's hard and frustrating, and everybody didn't really want to go get the second certification when you're already doing the job.
Yeah,
right?
we all kicked and complained and did it anyway.
But and it does create a little bit higher barrier to entry when you want to start. It's harder to say, today I would like to be a QSA. Yeah. And okay, well, if you already have one of those certifications, then maybe in a couple of months you could get there. Yeah. And it unfortunately, you have to be a good test taker sometimes too. These tests are standardized tests, and you can make it through them. It's going to be okay, but it's a standardized test. Yeah. And you have to kind of be good at how they ask questions and answer them, and you're trying to say, well, I have this common body of knowledge now, and so that's what the council is trying to say is, let's have a common body of knowledge at some level, because we know that everybody can't be everything, but let's give somebody a little bit of experience so that they know, oh, I've heard about that, I'm going to go do more research. And that's the key.
Right. And I think that for me, the knowledge, the experience that I had before, the hands-on that you were talking about earlier, if you understand how to look at firewall rules and evaluate how it's going to affect an organization's security, then you have a leg up on somebody who hasn't done that. But it doesn't mean that you should feel like just because you can't do all of the things that you shouldn't aim for it. We as in any job, I think that the conversation a lot of people have heard of the imposter syndrome, and a lot of us in a lot of fields feel imposter syndrome. But I think that the QSA more than a lot really lends itself to that, because somebody says to you, hey, do you know this very specific thing about Kubernetes in AWS if you're going to be my security assessor? And you say, well, I will by the time I get there.
Exactly. And I think that's, if anybody's listening to the podcast that is looking for a QSA or has dealt with QSAs in the past, I think that's an interesting perspective. I think you're right. A lot of times people think, well, I need a QSA that has done exactly what I've done. And I'm going, yeah, good luck. Yeah, right? Because it's really difficult to find somebody who's done that. But I think what you should do is know that, and as a QSA, I think we know we don't know everything, but we have resources to go find out them. And one of the skills and qualities of a QSA that makes a really good QSA is recognizing and saying, I don't, and I'm okay with that, but I will go find out.
Right.
And I'll get right back to you. Can we table that?
Yeah.
And being able to handle that rather than being, I remember the first couple of audits I had done in my first year, I had an IT guy that just sort of plastered me with, well, we do this and you should accept that and you do this. And I'm going,
Mm-hmm.
And after a while, I'm going, and I felt, oh shoot, he thinks I'm an idiot.
Yeah.
I know he thinks I'm an idiot.
Yeah.
But at the end of that,
doesn't happen often, but every once in a while you run into someone like that, and you just think, okay, are you just having is this your normal behavior?
So, but then when I had time to sit down in the evenings or back in the office or whatever, sit about it, learn about it, and I can apply the principles, then I was able to have a discussion with this person and say, no, here's the situation.
Right.
And this is why. And I agree with you or I don't or whatever. Mm-hmm. And so being able to make it through those situations without freezing up and without giving up and thinking that you're a worthless person and just saying, I don't know that.
Right.
But I'm going to, I have people, I have resources, I'm going to go figure it out.
So the characteristics of resilience and then being willing to learn new things are really important in this job. Yeah. So sometimes I get asked by people, well, I think I want to be a QSA, but what is the job like? What do you do?
Yeah, well, that's good. And so I think, the day in the life of a QSA, right?
Yeah.
I think one thing that you have to sort of understand is that you don't just have necessarily one project to work on all the time. So you've got 5 projects in different phases, and that's okay. And you have to be able to say, all right, well, today I'm focusing on these 2. I can do these 3 emails. I get up in the morning, get to work, start looking at my email list, and I go, oh, I got to answer these 3 guys. I know I need to write this report, and I'm going to say, to be a good QSA, I'm going to spend 3 hours writing this report today, right? Which is the hardest thing to do.
It's so hard.
Because you can say, I'm going to do that, and then at the end of the day, you go, oh, I never got to that.
Yeah, it's easier when you have a deadline, and you're like, I have to get this done by midnight, or everything blows up.
Deadlines usually make it work. But a day in the life is you're dealing with people and all kinds of different things, and it's emails. It maybe you have a phone call that's scheduled. Maybe somebody really early in the process, and you're helping them understand. Or you're even training, right? You may even be saying to somebody, well, I really don't understand why I need to have a firewall here or why I need to have a web app firewall, whatever it is. Well, let's talk about it. And here's what it prevents. And you have to be able to help people through some of these thought processes. Right. So that's part of a day in the life. Writing might be part of a day in life. Communication is probably always part of a day in the life of a QSA.
A little bit of project management on your own work.
Exactly. Just saying, look, it'd be really awesome to spend, all my day doing all these emails, but I can spend an hour doing emails and then I'm going to do some more tomorrow.
It's going to be a little of something else.
Right.
Because like you said, you have several projects, they're going at the same time and they're in different states. So you might be scheduling a first call with one, you might be reviewing information that's been uploaded from another, you might be scheduling an on-site, you might be performing an on-site, you might be writing the report, you might be wrapping up. There are all sorts of different phases of a project that, because you have several happening at the same time, you might be doing all of the phases of a project in one day.
Right.
Although it's really hard to do an on-site day.
You can't really do much else on an on-site day. In fact, even at night, it's hard to keep doing stuff. It's amazing how much you get exhausted talking to people.
Yeah, your brain gets a little bit tapped out, and you say, okay, I've just had this many hours looking at your stuff. I think I need to go to bed now.
Yes.
But that's actually the most fun for in a lot of cases too, is the on-sites. Because you get to actually sit down with people and understand, but also there is kind of an element of, hey, I got to travel to someplace cool.
Right. And I have liked that part. I have a little map, just like you have in your office, of all of the places I've been in the world. And sometimes I look at that and I go, wow, what a cool job.
Yeah. What's your favorite place you've been?
For this job, probably Bangkok. I thought that was really interesting.
Sure. Right? Yeah, I haven't been there yet.
And Japan. I thought Asia was really interesting. So, and the other cool, and so travel is something. So you also have to know that your family has to be okay with travel.
Yeah.
And that's part of the job. Sure. You're going to have to travel sometimes. And depending on the company you may work for, you may travel more or less. Some companies try to control that a little bit to make sure that our quality, and that's what we do. We make sure our quality is really good by not making people travel 3 weeks.
That's one of the things that
4 weeks a year,
really like about this company is that we are not pressured to do the staggering number of audits that some of companies require for big QSA, but also we have some wiggle room that it very generously our CEO says, hey, if you're going to be in Singapore, maybe you should stay there for an extra day.
Yeah, exactly.
And you get to go and see some things that you would never otherwise get to see.
Right. And that has been a really part of the fun, because you can watch a movie and you go, hey, I was right there.
Yeah, exactly.
I've seen that. And so that is a rewarding part. So if you like to travel, it's a great way to see parts of the world, and to interact with different cultures but that's the cool part. It's not all glamour, but that is a reward.
It is,
right?
yeah, it is a reward, and it's important. It's very important to have those in-person interviews and the in-person eyes-on. It makes for a much better assessment. But if you get focused on I want to be a good QSA, then sometimes you miss out on the chance to, hey, you have an extra day here. Would you like to go where the really good mangoes are? That was the Philippines. I love
or the world's
Philippines.
largest nonstick frying pan.
Oh, right? I've seen a very, very large
the world's largest bat.
bison in North Dakota. So, yeah, there are some great reasons to let yourself go and see things, but then balance that with doing good work.
And you're traveling too much when I like this airport.
Yes.
There's a good restaurant in this airport, right?
Yeah. And sometimes you'll wake up and say, oh, the best chicken noodle soup I ever had was in Macau, and I can't go there today.
Yeah, exactly.
It's great. So that is a really good, but can also be difficult. I know that I have some colleagues who struggle because of having small children. And if you're leaving every week and your kids are crying as you're going out the door, then you kind of have to ask, is this the right job as well?
And we've had people that worked for us that have made those decisions, and that's just life. It's part of it.
So I love this, knowing the day-to-day, it is sustained work. Some of it is very brain intensive. Some of it is more relaxing and fun. It's never the same every single day.
And I think that's why I've never been in a job for 15 years that I've enjoyed this much.
Yeah.
And I was thinking about that the other day, and I thought, it's because it's different. I mean, it's the same but different.
Exactly.
And so in some ways it's comforting because you know enough to help anybody.
Yeah.
And it's going to be different the next person that you help.
You get to learn a new thing tomorrow. So, but what if a person decides, okay, I'm going to be a QSA, and then what if I don't, try it for a few years and I don't want to continue? Where do they go from here?
Yeah. Well, and I think that's a great question, in that the skills and the training you get in a job like this are really valuable in other parts of the cybersecurity or IT world. Yeah. And we've had a lot of people that have done this job for 5 years or 6 years or 10 or whatever, and said, now I want to go and be a CIO at a company, a small company or whatever. And, it can be a great experience thing to put on your resume. And
jump into that CISO role.
The thing that I would recommend, though, is that you don't jump in to be a QSA for a year and then think, I'm now going to go somewhere else and make a ton of money and be this really cool guy. Spend some time really learning, and that's what's going to teach you a lot, is when you get the experience to see 100 different people's networks, and then somebody says, can you help us design our network? You go, yeah, I think I can do that.
Yeah.
And I think that's the advantage of this job, is that you get so much experience so quickly and so much exposure to so many different things that it does lend itself really well to other career endeavors. It doesn't have to be the end of your career.
No.
Although I'd like it to be for everybody, because I don't like to hire new people, right? So.
Well, I've never had a job that I have enjoyed as much as I enjoy this one. I'm every new customer, every new project that starts up feels exciting and new and fresh and different. And also at the same time, sometimes I get to review a company that I've reviewed before and assess them on an annual basis for a couple, 2-3 years. And that's that gives you that kind of foundation of, oh, I know these guys. And
it's a more relaxing time.
Yeah, this is more
year.
Exactly.
Oh, now I remember what I was going to say. And that's, it kind of relates to that. I don't think I have ever done an audit that I wasn't nervous about.
Yeah.
Right? And so you kind of have to push through some of that. I mean, you wake up in the morning and you go, what if I miss something? What if I don't? What if I? And you go, well, I'm just going to go.
Yeah.
And when you're in the middle of it, it's really good and you like dealing with the people and everything. But it's, again, one of those life skills where you just have to go and do and be on site and interact with people and see something new that kind of occurs to you. And that's really kind of the fun genesis of this job is that you've talked to maybe the same company 2 or 3 times in a row, and then there's a new person they've just hired and they said something. You say, what did you just say?
Right, and it's completely different.
Wait a minute,
Or
let's talk more about that.
Yeah, or they're very new and you get the chance to kind of teach them what words mean from a PCI standpoint, right? And so there's value in the foundation that you've built with the companies, and then whatever they decide to re-architect things or bring in new people.
Right. I think sometimes people may worry or maybe it was just me in the early times is that nobody likes an auditor. Right?
No, that's true. Yeah.
And you shouldn't always tell the truth to your auditor.
No, that's not true.
But there is this feeling of, will people like me? Can I have a good relationship with people and help them be compliant to something, right? And that's a difficult thing, but possible.
Exactly.
But it is something that's, you are the auditor, and sometimes you have to say hard things. So that's another skill I think that's really important in this job is, I can say no to that, right? And be okay with it and be able to defend it a little bit. But I also can be flexible and say, so you explain to me why you meet this requirement and convince me. Okay, you've done a good job. I can write that up. You know? And
sometimes it's just an additional knowledge of something.
Right, but you have to have enough to say, no.
Yeah. The nice thing about PCI assessments is that they lend themselves to a collaborative approach. And so you start off saying, all right, here are the requirements. Here is your scope. You've told me this is your scope. I agree with you that this is your scope. So if this is your scope, therefore these things apply in these ways. Tell me how it does. And if you get the information and the evidence from the group before you even go on site, then together you discover, hey, what are you doing for this? This is what it says. I don't think it meets this. And then you don't have to deliver bad news.
Right. It shouldn't be a surprise.
Right, it should not
most of the time we work with people, it's not a surprise.
No, it should not be a shock finding.
Yeah.
Together you find out as you go along. And then I will often have clients that I work with where we'll get to something and I'll say, explain this to me. Okay, let's reread this requirement. What are you seeing the same thing that I'm seeing? And they'll tell me when they have a gap. And so it doesn't become this, conflict thing with your assessor. And I really appreciate that about the groups that I work with, where it is
right. And I think that's another interesting thing to point out about this industry. There are some IT audit or some financial audit things where the guy comes with the clipboard and asks you a question and he goes, "Oh,
yeah."
Yeah,
those are the worst.
What does that mean? No, I'm
just taking notes.
Whereas I think the thing that I like about the QSA industry from the get-go is that they allow us to help people prepare. And so you're right. There shouldn't be when we do an audit and you ask somebody a question, there should never be
Yeah.
Right? It's like, yeah, right. We talked about that before.
We talked about that.
How is that going? Yeah. What is it going to,
This is the process.
Show me now what you've done.
And of course, you cannot accept, future work as to mark something in place. But you can together know what that future work looks like, what the timing is, how you agree on when the assessment on-site timing is going to coincide with that. So it becomes something that is supportive of the organization's compliance efforts rather than something that is painful and frightening and combative.
Right. So, and I think that, interestingly, I'm getting this thought. Somebody could listen to this who wants to be a QSA or somebody who wants to look for a QSA.
Oh, yeah.
We've talked about a lot of things that are probably some good things to figure out if your QSA has these abilities, these qualities, these, So it's a fun job.
It is a fun job, and I'm super glad that I get to be here, and I hope that I get to do it for many more years. Thank you again for joining us.
My pleasure. Anytime.
And thank you. I always appreciate questions and comments from listeners. Please feel free to share this out and leave comments, leave reviews. Love to hear from you. Take care. Thanks for watching. To watch more episodes of SecurityMetrics podcast, click on the box on the left. If you prefer to listen to this podcast, it's available on all your favorite podcast platforms. See you on the slopes.